She was dumped like garbage, but her tail still moved. They say the world can be cruel, but sometimes cruelty wears a face so familiar, so routine, that no one even stops to question it. That's exactly what happened on a quiet street behind a row of buildings where nobody looked twice. What happens next will leave you speechless. At Fur and Fate Stories, we believe every rescue tale deserves to be told. Hit subscribe for the full, unbelievable story, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. A dented green dumpster sat at the far end, filled with rotting leftovers, broken furniture, and plastic bags bursting at the seams. One of those bags wasn't trash. Not really. Not unless you think life itself can be disposable. Inside the bag was a dog, barely alive. Curled up in the corner, limbs twisted unnaturally, a body so thin her ribs looked like piano keys. Her fur was patchy, her eyes half closed, the whites yellowed and crusted. One leg was swollen, her belly was scraped and raw. There was no fight left in her. No barking, no growling, not even fear. Just breathing. Slow, shallow breathing. And then her tail moved. It was barely a flick, like a whisper on the wind, but it was there. Even as flies buzzed around her and the metal walls of the dumpster radiated heat, her tail moved. A gesture so gentle, so heartbreaking, it almost didn't seem real. Because here was a creature thrown away like she didn't matter. But she still hoped, still trusted, still believed someone might care. No one knew how long she'd been there. Hours? A day? Long enough for her body to give up, but not her spirit. She hadn't crawled in. Someone put her there. Someone bagged her up like trash, sealed her fate, and walked away. That should have been the end. But it wasn't. A noise echoed in the alley, footsteps, then silence. Then the clatter of a dumpster lid creaking open. A boy looking for scrap metal peered inside. He didn't scream, he just stared. At first he thought she was already dead, but then he saw it too. The tail, that tiny flicker of life in a mountain of decay. He ran, not from fear, but because something in his young heart told him this wasn't right. He found help. Someone called a rescue, and within an hour, the woman with soft eyes and steady hands was climbing into that dumpster, not to remove garbage but to save a life. She lifted the bag gently, sliced it open, and found a heartbeat. Weak. But there. She didn't flinch. She didn't speak. She simply wrapped the dog in a towel, cradled her close, and climbed back out of that darkness. The alley faded behind them, the smell, the heat, the buzzing flies, all forgotten. The dog didn't move much, but her tail, even wrapped in cloth, tapped gently against the rescuer's arm. She'd been discarded like nothing, but someone saw her. Someone cared, and her story was only beginning. The children thought they found a ghost. What they actually found was a miracle. After she was lifted from the dumpster, the rescuer wrapped her tighter, shielding her from the sun, the flies, and the stairs. But the story didn't start with the rescue van. It started with children. Small feet, big hearts, and eyes still too young to look away from suffering. Earlier that day, a group of kids had been kicking a half-deflated soccer ball through the alley. They weren't supposed to be there. Parents warned them to stay away. But curiosity led them toward the rusted dumpster when the ball rolled underneath it. That's when they heard it. A whimper. Faint, dry, almost like the wind. They froze. One of the boys knelt down and squinted into the shadows. At first, he thought it was a stuffed animal, a sad, ruined toy someone had thrown away. But then it moved, just the tail. Just once. The kids ran. Not away, but toward something. Toward help. They didn't know what else to do. But they knew what they saw didn't belong in the dark. They knocked on doors. They shouted to passersby. It wasn't long before someone listened. A neighbor called the local rescue. Within the hour, a woman with experience in tragedies had arrived. By then, the children had returned. They stood nearby as the rescuer climbed into the dumpster. They held their breath, and when she lifted the dog up, cradling her broken frame in a blanket, none of them looked away. Some had tears in their eyes. One little girl asked quietly, Is she gonna make it? No one answered. No one could promise that. But the rescuer saw something in the dog's expression. Something that hinted this wasn't over. As she walked toward the rescue van, the dog's head leaned against her shoulder. It was the smallest thing, but it said everything. Trust wasn't gone. Not completely. And that tail, wrapped in the blanket, moved again. Weak, but purposeful. The children watched the van pull away. They didn't know her name. They didn't know where she would go. But they knew they had seen something unforgettable. A living creature, left for dead, who still had the strength to wag her tail. That small flicker of life, the one everyone could have missed, had changed something in them. In their eyes, this wasn't just a rescue. It was a lesson they'd carry forever. That sometimes, even when things look hopeless, life finds a way to ask for help. And sometimes, help comes not from heroes in capes, but from kids with open eyes. They unwrapped her like broken glass, but found something shining underneath. When the van pulled up to the clinic, time felt like it paused. The rescuer carried her inside like an injured newborn. Gently, slowly, like one wrong move could shatter what little was left. The vet techs didn't ask questions. One look told them everything. She was placed on a stainless steel table, still wrapped in the towel. Her eyes stayed open, but she didn't move. Not even a twitch. Only the tail, still there, still giving. As they unwrapped her, silence took over. It wasn't just physical damage. It was the weight of neglect. Her body was a map of pain. Deep scars, skin infections, sores, bruises, one leg grotesquely bent from an untreated fracture. Her gums were pale. Her breathing was thin. It was clear she had been like this for a long, long time. The vet leaned in and listened to her heart. Slow, but steady. She wasn't giving up, and so neither would they. They began the work. IV fluids, antibiotics, pain relief, cleaning the wounds. Each touch was measured, gentle. No loud voices, no sudden movements. Just respect for a soul that had known too much cruelty. She didn't resist, no whimpers, no growls, no flinching. She just lay there, eyes half closed, trusting. The way she allowed their hands to touch her said something bigger than words ever could. She had every reason to fear, and yet she didn't. Hours passed. Her vital signs improved slightly. Not enough to celebrate, but enough to keep going. They wrapped her in clean blankets, placed her in a heated kennel, and dimmed the lights. Then something happened. As the rescuer reached through the kennel bars to stroke her head, the dog shifted. Slowly, her head nudged against the hand, and her tail wagged. Not weak, not forced, a real, deliberate wag. It was the first real movement she had made since being found. Everyone in the room froze. A vet tech covered her mouth. The vet closed his eyes and let out a quiet breath. That one moment, so small, so simple, was everything. It wasn't just survival, it was connection. Even after everything, she still wanted love. Every scar had a story, and every step forward was a fight. The days that followed were filled with slow victories and quiet heartbreaks. She had survived the first night. That alone was a miracle. But healing isn't a straight path. It bends and bruises, just like the bones she carried. She still didn't stand. Her leg, likely broken weeks before, needed surgery. The infection in her skin meant more antibiotics. Her stomach, shrunken and weak, could only handle small amounts of food at a time. But she never complained. Never once. She would rest in her kennel, head propped on a rolled towel, eyes watching the door. Always watching. Like she was waiting for someone. Or maybe making sure they wouldn't leave her again. Volunteers came by, but she only responded to the rescuer, the woman who pulled her from the dumpster. Her scent, her voice, her presence, those were safe. When she entered the room, the dog's eyes softened. Her tail moved again, a little stronger each time. Weeks passed. The surgery was a success, but recovery was long. Physical therapy started, just light movements. The first time she stood on her own, her legs wobbled and she almost collapsed, but she didn't. She took one step, then another, and her eyes changed. That glassy, haunted stare began to clear. She would blink slower, breathe deeper, She even started licking the rescuer's hand. Her body had been broken, but her spirit had not. Then slowly she began to remember what it meant to be a dog. Part 5. Her first run. She ran like the earth owed her something. And maybe it did. The first run came months later. The clinic had done all they could. Her leg healed. Her skin was smooth again, her weight nearly back to normal. She'd been moved to a foster home. Open spaces, soft blankets, and a yard she could explore without fear. At first she didn't leave the porch. She would sit there for hours, watching the wind move the grass, sometimes wagging her tail but never stepping forward. Like she wasn't sure she deserved that kind of freedom. And then one morning, she did. She walked down the steps and across the lawn. Then she trotted. Then she ran. It was clumsy and uneven at first, her rebuilt legs still adjusting, but it didn't matter. She ran with her mouth open, ears bouncing, tail flying behind her like a flag of triumph, and for the first time she barked. It was raw, rusty, like something unused for years. But it was joy. It was wild. It was her reclaiming the life she almost lost. The rescuer watched from the porch, tears in her eyes. Not out of sadness, but awe. Because no one who saw her in that dumpster could have imagined this moment. She didn't just survive. She came back to life. She was thrown away like trash. Now she helps others heal. The adoption didn't take long. Hundreds of people had followed her journey online. They cried at the photos. They cheered for her recovery. But the truth was, she had already chosen her home. With the woman who saved her. The bond between them was too deep, too sacred. The rescuer finalized the adoption, placed a new collar on her, and gave her a name that meant light. It suited her. She had been a flicker in the dark, and now she was a flame. She began visiting hospitals and shelters, trained as a therapy dog. Children who wouldn't speak to anyone would talk to her. They would pet her scarred head, and she would lean in without hesitation. It was like she could feel their pain. Maybe because she'd lived it. She became a symbol of resilience, of hope, not just for other dogs, but for anyone who had ever been discarded. Her story wasn't about the dumpster anymore. It was about what came after. She was once seen as garbage. Now she was a light in other people's darkness, and she never stopped wagging her tail. Thank you for watching our entire video. Please subscribe to the channel so that we can share more heartwarming stories like this one.